Marie-Karin von Gumpenberg, please. The floor is yours. We cannot hear you yet.
So,
sorry.
Now.
Perfect.
Niklas and Konstantin, thank you once again for presenting this very useful study. When we discussed it at Café Kiev, the study, there was a key question about how we promote social cohesion, taking into account the results of your study. And also there was a question, so what kind of participatory approaches might work, taking into the consideration of this vertical and horizontal cohesion issues? Any ideas on that?
Yes, that there are approaches. I think there are different approaches for both dimensions. So for the vertical cohesion, participation in reconstruction processes is one way to approach this. So participation in the form, for instance, of consultations, also in the form of being part of decision making on reconstruction. But I would also highlight here that there's a trade-off, because we see that participants in the survey, they said that participation in these kind of decisions would induce trust, but they also said, even more of them said, that quick and visible results would induce trust. And I would make the argument that there is a conflict between these two, if you want to put it into practice, because obviously the more participatory your decision making on reconstruction is, the more consultations you hold, and so on. It just takes longer. And so finding the right balance is quite important here. But for now, I would still say that there's so to say safe room for improvement, for more participation, because in many communities there has just been none so far in bigger reconstruction. And then the other dimension that I mentioned, this bottom-up peer-to-peer approach, can be supported by donors in a limited capacity. So for instance, in Irpin, we've seen that there were a few NGOs that developed spontaneously in 2022. They began with just people coming together and doing localized reconstruction, clearing debris, starting to build back private houses. And there was so much interest in that at some point, a few of the people engaged in these kind of events, they started to formalize this a little bit by creating a local association or a small NGO, and or just an initiative, even without a formal organization. And these kind of initiatives, they can be, for instance, supported through small grants. We're not talking about a lot of money here, and it's also cumbersome for donors to provide these kind of grants. But I would argue that there is value in that. Just to give you one example.
Thank you. Maybe we try again with Mr. Lüdke.
Zweiter Versuch.
Maybe everyone else can close their microphones.
Besser? Tja, irgendwas geht nicht.
Do you maybe have a headset that you could use?
No.
Sonst versuchen wir es, also wenn Sie ein Headset haben, könnten wir das damit nochmal versuchen. Alternativ würde ich vorschlagen, dass Sie die Frage schriftlich ausformulieren, auch wenn sie etwas länger ist, und ich lese die dann vor am Ende. Dankeschön. But we do have another question from Hanna Kikwitsky. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay, hello. Thank you for the study and for this meeting. My name is Hanna Kikwitsky. I work for Caritas Germany in Kiev, and I'm calling from there. So this is very interesting because also Caritas and many other organizations are already doing reconstruction work in several places of Ukraine. So my question would be a little bit from your assessment, do you have more information about like the composition of the people of the society that live in Irpin and you know that you have interviewed, and can you make any kind of comparisons or so to other areas in Ukraine that are under less quote unquote safe conditions? Because I could imagine that the factor of, I mean, Irpin is close to Kiev, many things are functioning, communities are quite strong, people have different ages and gender. I could imagine that not all of this is applicable to, let's say, communities in Kharkiv Oblast or Mykolaiv Oblast, right, where the security situation is different and where also maybe less younger people are there who could help each other and so on. So from your knowledge working on this study over the last month, could you draw any kind of assumptions to other areas, or do you know of any other studies on that? Yes, because this is like a really interesting findings that you have, and I think it can help us a lot. But yeah, just put it in context. Maybe you could tell something more about that. Thank you.
Yes, of course, and I think that's an excellent question. And just like I just made the comment that our learnings from other contexts, they don't travel well to Ukraine, and you can or you should make the same cautious comment when you apply the learnings from Irpin to other communities, because as you rightfully mentioned, the circumstances are very different in many areas, and the closer you get to the danger zone, so to say it. Also, the closer you go there, the more you see that other reconstruction needs are simply there. So if you go to any community that is closer to the front line, and you look at the kind of immediate reconstruction needs that are there, you see that there's a bigger emphasis on basic needs and on reconstruction that prioritizes and emphasizes the immediate need for security, which is less so in Irpin, where already, because it's quite a secure town, and at least we're not, at least right now, it's not under the threat of massive, large-scale violence. We can already talk about very different topics when it comes to recovery, and so I would agree with the premise of your question that these findings they don't really travel well necessarily, even though in terms of the trust question, I would think that you can see a very similar picture to Irpin and other communities without having done the survey there, so I don't have numbers for that. But I would expect that you can see similar levels of trust or mistrust into institutions elsewhere. And then on the peer-to-peer level, I think this is something to be explored in further research. I think it's fair to make the assumption that similar dynamics you can also see elsewhere. By that I mean that cohesion is induced by mutual cooperation, by helping one another, by experiencing agency. You can expect that this would also be the case elsewhere, but that's really something to be confirmed. So yeah, I'm afraid I don't have super satisfying answers empirically to your question, but that's just because we haven't captured that in the survey yet.
Maybe just to add, of course, we don't have any baseline study, so we can't match these findings with the social cohesion which was present, for example, in Irpin before the outbreak of the invasion. Yeah? So that's also a deficit of the study. And of course, you have a history of trust in public institutions and in government, and this can vary also within Ukraine. But I think the main point, I think, is really important that when you think about reconstruction, you also have to think about the impact it has on the social fabric, and you really want to promote a more participatory and democratic local community. Yeah? And from there you can build up and you can change also democratic culture in the country. Yeah? So that's maybe, but it's difficult to generalize, that's true.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have another question from Alexander Anderson. If you would like to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for this very, very useful study. In a way, I'd just like to build a little bit upon Hannah's question, in that when we're talking about social cohesion and sort of, and then the who benefits, who loses, etc., from reconstruction, I'm interested in how you would actually take that logic and actually build it into the structure of your surveying. For example, Hannah spoke about places that are less safe and than maybe Irpin is now, and where maybe more of the population is still displaced. How would one, and did you in fact, was this part of your planning when you went about the survey? How would you build that factor into your surveying, being able to survey the people, the residents who are actually displaced, who are not there, and also just generally trying to think through in your survey, what was the approach in terms of when you are going to interviews qualitatively, how to pick out stakeholders and how to do that in a way that was proportional maybe to the original damage pre-2022 shape of the population of a particular place, obviously Irpin in this case.
Yes, another very good methodological question. So on the qualitative part, the interview part, obviously the interview sample was not representative. Also by design. The purpose of that was to make sense first of all of the reconstruction environment. So if you look into the study, you'll also find a chapter on how reconstruction worked in Irpin, a timeline and the different funding streams that were involved in that, to get that kind of an analytical baseline, and then later to make sense of the findings of the survey. And that was the representative part of this research. Obviously, this being a face-to-face survey, so basically we work with a sociological institute in Ukraine that went from household to household and talked to people at their doorstep. That meant that obviously we didn't include in the study people that have left Irpin for different reasons, but it did include quite a sizable amount of people that have come to Irpin, so the internally displaced people that now live in Irpin. And those were a sizable part of the sample, and also they are a sizable part of the Irpin population. Now, it is a bit difficult to compare whether this was representative just because demographic data that accurately displays displays how the percentage of people in Irpin right now that are IDPs, for instance, that doesn't exist. So so we had to work with what we had there. Yeah.
Thank you. I see that we now have the question of Mr. Lütke in writing. I would read that quickly, and then we have another question from another participant. The question is in German. Zur Vorgeschichte. Ich komme aus Borna und wir sind die Partnerstadt von Irpin seit 1976. Erstmalig war ich 1977 in Irpin. Seit 2013 bin ich regelmäßig mindestens zweimal jährlich in Irpin und kenne die Stadt und die Menschen dort durchaus sehr gut. Nach der Besetzung Irpins im Jahr 2022 und der Vertreibung der Russen im März 2022 waren meine Frau und ich bereits im April privat in Irpin. Seit dieser Zeit haben wir eine Vielzahl von Hilfsgütern persönlich nach Irpin gebracht. In der Zeit der Besetzung haben wir hier über 700 Irpinerinnen und Irpiner in Borna aufgenommen. Verwundete Soldaten von der Grenze abgeholt und hier in unserer Klinik behandelt. Letztmalig war ich persönlich vor 3 Wochen in Irpin, um alle Projekte abzustimmen. Diese sind Ferien ohne Krieg für Kinder von gefallenen Irpinerinnen und Irpinern, die Fortführung der Schulpartnerschaften und vieles mehr, was wir dieses Jahr noch machen wollen. Der nächste Hilfstransport wird im Juli in diesem Jahr stattfinden. 4 Linienbusse und Sachen für unseren Partnerverein Helfende Hände, der sich um die derzeit rund 25.000 Binnenflüchtlinge in Irpin kümmert. Meine Frage ist, wer hat vor Ort die Befragungen mit wem durchgeführt? Wir haben dazu zumindest von der Stadtverwaltung nichts gehört. Und leider habe ich das Ziel der Studie nicht wirklich verstanden, was aber meinem mangelhaften Englisch geschuldet sein kann. Would you like to answer that question maybe in German as well?
Ja, gerne doch. Zuerst die Frage nach dem Ziel der Studie. Das Ziel der Studie war es, zu erforschen, wie sich Wiederaufbau auf den sozialen Zusammenhalt in Irpin auswirkt. Vor dem Hintergrund, dass selbstverständlich im Rahmen von Wiederaufbauprozessen Entscheidungen über Ressourcenallokation und so getroffen werden und das zumindest potenziell Konfliktpotenzial hat. Und das wussten wir eben auch aus anderer Forschung, aus anderen Wiederaufbaukontexten. Und dementsprechend wollten wir schauen, wie lokal dort der Zusammenhalt in der Bevölkerung von Wiederaufbaumaßnahmen, von dem gesamten Prozess beeinflusst wird. Und Ihre zweite Frage war zur Befragung, die wurde durchgeführt, also zur quantitativen Befragung, diese wurde durchgeführt vom Rasunkow Center. Das ist ein Meinungsforschungsinstitut. Und da sind wirklich Leute von Haustür zu Haustür gegangen und haben den Fragebogen, den wir davor entwickelt haben, dort abgefragt. Ja, dass sie von der Stadtverwaltung nichts gehört haben, ja, tut mir leid, aber das wundert mich jetzt auch nicht unbedingt, weil ich jetzt auch für den qualitativen Teil nicht mit sehr vielen Leuten aus der Stadtverwaltung gesprochen habe. Nur mit einigen und auch anderen Teilhabenden am Wiederaufbau. Genau, deshalb haben Sie da sehr wahrscheinlich nichts von mitbekommen.
Vielen Dank. Geht immer noch nicht.
Thank you. We have another question from Inga Schalinski. Please, if you want to take the floor.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. Oh, perfect. So my name is Inga Schalinski. I'm from the University of the Bundeswehr in Munich. And I have the professorship for clinical psychology and trauma therapy. So bringing in another perspective maybe on this topic. But we have noticed in trauma research that trauma does not affect only one person, it affects the full community and most likely also processes of reconstructing, because what we have learned is that we need to take care of the community being able to speak again about their experiences in regard of traumatic experience that happened there before you can do next steps, because we tend as humans to avoid everything that is when you're afraid, you want to take it away from you, and you want others to be responsible. That's why I'm not too surprised to see that they feel it's something like building up local authorities, which I feel like it's from an outside perspective, it's natural to build up things that are important for the community. But I can imagine that they feel like they're responsible for the amount what happened to us here, because they have not protected us maybe in 22 when they were attacked. So that's why I think it's a very important perspective, because we have learned, once you like working in communities, once you enable them to talk again and speak about their experience, they will like take natural steps towards more exchange and also more important approach, like in support of the community and democracy. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And your last point also just made me think about this argument that I stressed earlier, that the perception of agency is something that is inducive for a positive outlook on reconstruction. That is something that we can see in this sociological research, and probably you are better placed than me to understand the psychological mechanism behind that, if that is something that social psychology has looked into. It's not my field of research, so I can't really say much about that, but thank you for sharing those insights.
Thank you very much.
Maybe just from my part, I think this is a very important topic, because when we think in this policy circles, we also talk about reconstruction more in infrastructure, institutions, maybe in this sociological terms of social cohesion, democracy, but we always a little bit forget the psychology and the effects of on humans this war has. And I think this will be a very tough challenge for Ukraine, and we will see the long-term effects in everything, as well as especially in the political system. So keeping in mind the individual effects of the war, and how to combine them with our policy goals in the reconstruction process is very important. But there are no wonder solutions, I think we can hope for. So, but at least we in FAS, and I think the German government as well, think that in a democratic society, such problems are much more easy, better to solve than if you think in other contexts. Yeah, I think it's a good input, but unfortunately, this study is not so much about it.
There might be next studies, and you can address this, how much this also accounts for these kind of like answer patterns that you observe. And I think humans are much more proactive and constructive once they have overcome a little bit the silence about the experience, which we definitely have, and also all the inherent cycles of violence that are out there in societies that are burdened by such situation. Which makes them more, and I think it's much easier than you may think to do it actually. But it's something we all do not like, I think, to talk about bad stuff happening to people.
Thank you. I think we answered all the questions from the audience. And with that, we are now almost already at the end of our event. I would really like to thank you again, Niklas Balbon and Konstantin Groll, for sharing your insights, and also all participants for the interesting discussions and the questions that you have raised.